The second overall pick is one of the most valuable assets that a team can have, with guys like Kevin Durant and Bill Russell who have not only significantly altered their team's trajectory, but changed the NBA in the meantime. Each class presents a talent pool that has the potential to shift championship odds and create history in the process. But over time, what should be the second best selection in the draft class has proven to be the most cursed pick in all of the draft. With busts left and right, injuries, and some of the most puzzling selections in NBA history, what in the world is going on with the second overall pick? Starting in the year 2000, when the Vancouver Grizzlies selected Stromile Swift out of LSU with their second overall pick. Now, to be fair, this draft class was horrible, and I mean it. It produced just 3 All-Stars, and team after team just completely missed. But after getting selected as high as second overall in the draft, there are some certain expectations, and some expectations that Swift did not live up to. Swift had led all of college in blocks per game and field goal percentage during his final year. He was an athletic beast who loved going for the big dunks and the highlight reel blocks. But apart from that, there really wasn't much else. This led Swift to sit with the second unit throughout most of his time with the Grizzlies, but who could blame them? Sure, the NBA is a completely different game than college, but when your field goal percentage drops by 15% in the transfer, that's an issue, and it was never fixed. Although the Grizzlies tried their hardest to develop Swift, it did not work at all, because all he wanted to do was dunk the ball and beat shots into the stands. He would sky to try to pin every shot against the glass, but really it just resulted in being easy to get off balance and being caught in foul trouble more often than you would like. In 2001, he would be invited to the dunk contest, where he would place 4th, but become known for his high-flying abilities. But after getting noticed for his athleticism, it seemed like all Swift wanted to do from there on out was act like he was in the dunk contest. During his sophomore season, the Grizzlies would move to Memphis, but this is crucial because by the time Swift left, 4 years later, he was the last player to go from the team that moved from Vancouver. All this comes to show you that the Grizzlies never really gave up on Swift. The Grizzlies were also one of the worst franchises in sports history for their brief time in Vancouver, which kind of forced their hand into giving Swift real playing time. Now, the 05 offseason would see Swift sign a 4-year, $22 million deal with the Rockets, but honestly, his empty 12-6 stats were what earned him this, while not being able to shoot 50% from the field and being a total hack around the rim. He was the definition of a bust, but I guess the aura of the number 2 picks had more meaning than I thought. And instead of proving anyone wrong in a single year with the Rockets, he did the same shit. Averaging 8 and 4 with less than a block per game, Swift sat on the bench and was listed as a center behind Yao Ming. And I guess the Rockets just had enough of Swift shit after just one season, because they shipped him right back to Memphis as part of the deal for Shane Battier just that off-season. And I'm sure that the Grizzlies were expecting the results that Swift was going to give them, because another season of averaging around 8 and 4 with just around a block per game would be coming. They probably also knew that the Stro show was on its way. All he tried to do was go for the highlight reel plays, whether that was chasing someone down or going for an alley-oop. But he wouldn't last nearly as long in Memphis for his second stint, because halfway through the next season, Swift would be traded to the New Jersey Nets, where he would spend some time even further down the bench. And for Swift, the end was near. After playing in just 6 games the next season, Swift would get waived by the Nets, who just couldn't find a reason to keep the Stro show around. He would end up getting picked by the Suns to finish out that season and to end his career in a fitting way with 2 points, 1 board, 1 block, and 3 fouls in his last contest. Swift would end up going overseas, but his more popular post-NBA storylines have come via legal troubles, including charges for aggravated assault, improper telephone communications, and stalking. Now, Swift's story is just the tip of the iceberg. His career was a tough one because he sucked so much ass at basketball. He could never get his game going, he played like a moron, and ended up disappointing everyone. Way to start us off, Swift. Now, this next guy actually turned out alright, and I'm talking about Tyson Chandler, who was the 2001 number 2 selection. After coming straight out of high school, Chandler would start off his career with the Bulls, and it was looking at first like he would become the next number 2 overall pick to not work out, after 5 very mediocre seasons, which saw him averaging just 7 points and 7 boards. Really, to start his career, this guy kind of looked like a bust. He couldn't fit his game into any sort of system in the NBA. I mean, people had almost given up on him, but something shifted once he was put alongside Chris Paul, and when he could do what he was best at. There, he had multiple seasons averaging double-digit rebounds, and was as efficient as people hoped he could be, shooting over 60% from the field. Granted, he was just catching lobs and getting easy buckets, but it was progress nonetheless. He would then spend a year in Charlotte, and then would go on to win a championship with Dirk Nowitzki in Dallas, before landing in New York, where he hit his peak, winning Defensive Player of the Year, and making enough of a name for himself to get put on the 2012 US Olympic team. Now, the rest of his career would play out as many aging NBA players' careers do, but if you were looking at this list, it sure doesn't seem that the number 2 curse is really a curse yet, right? Well, let me take you down these next few years. Starting with Jay Williams, whose basketball career was cut short before it really began. Now, you may know Jay from ESPN broadcasts and commentating booths where he really sucks at his job, but before that, he was actually pretty good at it. After averaging 21 in his sophomore season at Duke and leading them to a title, Williams was very highly looked at by NBA scouts. And after he put together another season like that in his junior year, he was more than ready for the NBA game, and would go 2nd overall on draft night right behind Yao Ming. Jay Will was a dog. He had a well-rounded game while being able to jump out of the gym. It wasn't looking too bad for Williams, who would be able to pick up the starting point guard role for the Bulls, averaging 9.5 points and 4.7 assists per game. Sure, he was definitely inconsistent, but he was showing some promise, and he was still very, very young, trying to catch up to the speed of the NBA game at the position that usually takes the longest to develop. And then came disaster. On June 19, 2003, Williams was riding his Yamaha motorcycle along the roads of Chicago at high speeds without a helmet and in violation of team policy when he crashed his motorcycle into a streetlight. Luckily, it wouldn't hit his head, but the damage had been done. He fractured his pelvis, tore 3 ligaments in his right knee, and severed a main nerve in his leg. He would require physical therapy, and the chances of returning to pro basketball would be slim. Then, when the Bulls selected point guard Kirk Hinrich in the lottery of the next season, it was clear that Williams was no longer the future point guard of the franchise. He would go on to be waived by the Bulls and was given $3 million in compensation to help pay for physical rehabilitation, but his career had ended. He would sign with the Nets on a non-guaranteed contract but never see the floor, and then sign with a D-League team, the Austin Toros, but only play 3 games there before getting waived due to injury, which would put an end to his basketball career. Now, Darko Milicic was the 2nd overall pick in the 2003 draft, and his career didn't turn out as hoped either, but not for injury reasons. Milicic was drafted at the young age of 18 right after LeBron James, and the Detroit Pistons had high aspirations for the 7-footer out of Serbia. You see, Milicic came in as a very confident guy. I mean, getting drafted behind only the greatest prospect to ever do it has a nice ring to it, and so he too had high aspirations of what he could do in the league. Now, the Pistons were already a powerhouse team in the East, so it didn't really come as any surprise that Milicic struggled to get minutes when he was competing with Ben Wallace and a 14-year vet in Eldon Campbell. The Pistons still showed that they had Milicic as a big piece of their future plans, but after a 2nd straight season of playing less than half of the games while riding the bench, people began wondering when that time would come. After all, with the talent in that draft class that included Bron, D-Wade, Chris Bosh, and Carmelo Anthony, surely the 2nd overall pick would get some runtime at some point, right? Well, not really with the Pistons. After another half a season of playing in just blowout wins or losses, Milicic would be traded to the Orlando Magic. His time in Detroit was severely underwhelming, averaging 5.8 minutes and 1.6 points per game across the 2.5 years that he was with them. But in Orlando, he would see his role increase dramatically, averaging 7.4 points and 4.6 boards per game. He also showed off his rim protection, averaging 2 blocks per game in his stint with the team that season. He would get a chance to play the whole of the next season there, averaging 8 and 5 as a backup once again. That offseason, Milicic was still only 22 years old and would go on to sign a 3-year deal with the Memphis Grizzlies where he would get his first real starting gig in the league, but the results just weren't there. His confidence looked to be shot down. He had gone from being on top of the basketball world to being just another role player on a pretty shitty team. Shooting at around 44% from the field, Milicic would prove once and for all that he was a bust. Sure, he was talented enough to play at the NBA level, but him being a 2nd overall pick was just a travesty. He would lose his starting job in Memphis the next season and slip back to the bench where he'd remain. His time with Memphis was truly frustrating. He hated the city, he hated playing for the team, and it didn't help that he had lost the starting job with the first team that gave him one. He would reportedly punch the walls in his home when he got back from games and stated that he went through 2 years of classic depression when he played with the Grizzlies. And finally, after 2 seasons with the team, he would find a way out when the Grizzlies traded him to the Knicks for Quentin Richardson and some cash. But by the time he had gotten to New York, the NBA had already broken him. He would eat pizza and drink milkshakes instead of working out and mastering his craft, and so after just 8 games with the team, he would be permanently benched, which is when he stated that he was going to go back to Europe at season's end. But in the middle of that season, he would be traded to the T-Wolves even after telling Minnesota's GM, "Don't trade for me, for the love of God. I don't want to play in the NBA anymore. I'll ruin your team. I'll fuck up your team chemistry." But that wouldn't exactly happen. For once, Milicic was able to at least somewhat enjoy his time in the NBA under coach Kurt Rambis. And after getting signed to a 4-year extension, it felt like Milicic may have found his place, even if the Timberwolves were pretty terrible. In his only full season with Rambis at the helm, Milicic would put up 8.8 points, 5.2 boards, and 2 blocks per game, and looked better than he had ever looked in the past. But that offseason, Minnesota would move on from Rambis and hire Rick Adelman, who didn't see any potential upside for playing Milicic. And little by little, he would see his playing time slip out of his hands before being waived just 2 years into his 4-year deal. He would sign with the Celtics and play just 1 game in the next season before asking to be released, after which he retired. Now, to be a 10-year veteran in a league like the NBA is no easy feat. But when you are drafted with the 2nd overall pick with some of the greatest players of all time drafted around you, the production should be much higher than what it was. I mean, just look at the guy who was taken 2nd in 2004. Emeka Okafor, who started off his career right by averaging 15 and 11 to win Rookie of the Year. And although it looked like Okafor was about to lose the reins when he gained 20 pounds after his rookie season and missed most of the 2nd year with injuries, he lost that weight pretty quickly and got back to what he was doing. In his 3rd year, he would average 14 and 11 with a staggering 2.6 blocks per game, and had turned into one of those guys who just rolls out of bed and drops a double-double. And after 2 more years of basically the same thing, it was clear that Okafor was a reliable option to have at the center position. He had a good relationship with Charlotte, kept his production high enough, and sure as hell looked better than Milicic as the two progressed throughout their careers. He was passionate about the sport, got rewarded for it when the Bobcats signed him to a 6-year, $72 million extension in 2008, even if they want to keep him for more than another year, trading him to New Orleans for fellow number 2 pick Tyson Chandler. There, he would play in all 82 games to extend his streak to 3 straight seasons, appearing in every game. And if that doesn't tell you about his durability and dependability, I don't know what would. The following season, he would finally get some playoff action, but the next year, even with the lockout, Okafor would sadly run into some knee problems, which kept him out for 39 games before getting traded once again. He would spend a season with the Wizards before getting traded to the Suns, but before even stepping on the court, he was hit with a major setback. In September of 2013, he would be hit with the diagnosis of a herniated disc in his neck, which would keep him out for the entirety of the season. Now, there have been a number of guys who have struggled with herniated discs. Ben Simmons missed a year, Michael Porter Jr. was held out for his rookie season, and even Dwight Howard missed some significant time. But Okafor's was worse than the rest, because not only would he miss the 2013-2014 season, but he would miss the 3 following that season as well before getting cleared to play again. He would spend a bit of time in New Orleans after getting cleared, but it would be short-lived, and he would be forced to go play overseas before ending his basketball career. Okafor's NBA journey was just brutal. For a player to get drafted 2nd overall and earn his keep in the NBA, and then get hit with an injury that effectively ruined his career is just unimaginable. But that was the case for Emeka. As he sat on the sideline waiting out his injury, the game passed by him. It's as simple as that. Marvin Williams would be next in 2005, and after averaging 11 and 6 in college, he would come to the NBA and do the same thing. He was drafted by the Hawks, and after a year of riding the bench behind Josh Smith and Al Harrington, would find himself in a stable starting spot in which he would average 13 and 5. His next season would see him scoring a career high of 14.8, which for the Hawks probably wasn't as high as they were hoping for at his peak. After that season, he would develop more of a 3-point shot and stick around with the Hawks for 4 more seasons, consistently dropping 10 points or more, and becoming an important piece to 5 straight Hawks playoff appearances before getting moved to Utah for 2 seasons, and finding a long-time home in Charlotte, where he produced on the level of his Atlanta days, averaging 10 and 5 during his 5 years as a starter, before PJ Washington took over in 2019 when Williams would be bought out before signing with the Bucks in the bubble for one last ride in the league. Now, if you look at Williams' career, the word bust may come to mind, and while that may be true in the grand scheme of things, you have to take it in perspective. Apart from Chris Paul and Lou Will, Williams was the longest tenured NBA player from that class, lasting 15 years and started a chain of 2nd overall picks that teams could finally depend on. Because the following 2 years, we would see Texas Longhorns go number 2, who made us believe that there might have been some hope for the number 2 pick after all. Now, obviously, Kevin Durant and LaMarcus Aldridge aren't busts in any way, shape, or form, and the only curse associated with them was placed by Lil B. But just when things look like they're not so bad, Michael Beasley has to come in and shut it down. Michael Beasley would be the next number 2 pick after KD-like numbers in college, but he seems to be known for his off-court antics more than anything, but that shouldn't take anything away from the performances that he put on the earlier stages of his career. As a rookie, he shot splits of 47, 41, and 77, and proved that he could be the Carmelo Anthony type of scorer that people labeled him as. Sure, he wasn't a great defender, but if he could polish his game to the level of Melo, yeah, he was going to be pretty valuable. But the legal issues had already started. Before the season, Michael Beasley was involved in an incident at the rookie transition program where he set off a fire alarm in his room at 2 a.m. with a distinct smell of marijuana, and would be fined after turning himself in for slipping away from the cops. The next summer, he would check himself into a rehab center, and word had gotten out that he had been fined multiple times throughout that rookie season by Miami for violating team policies. So while everything seemed to be working fine on the courts, off the court, he wasn't exactly stable. In his second season, he won a starting spot, but he wasn't nearly as efficient, shooting under 30% from 3. But after the Heat finally decided that they were going to go after LeBron and Chris Bosh, they traded Beasley away to Minnesota for a couple of second-round picks. You know, he had his moments in Minnesota with 8 30-point games in his first season with the team, and scoring as much as 42 in a game, but he was also very inconsistent, forcing up bad shots and proving to be ineffective at times. But his pure scoring abilities were still too good to overlook, and he would sign a 3-year deal with Phoenix, where he would have the roughest year of his career, shooting just 40% from the field, 31% from 3. But even worse, he couldn't keep himself out of trouble. Just 1 year into his deal, he would be waived by the team in a saga that started after Beasley was arrested on suspicion of marijuana possession. But hey, at least he was able to sign and go play with Brown and the Heat on another title run, right? Well, even though he had played well, he would have to go overseas to get another NBA shot, but after dropping 29-10 with the Shanghai Sharks, the Heat would sign him for a third time, but that too would be short-lived, and he would have to go spend some more time in China before getting another contract. He would then spend the next 4 years on 4 different teams with a couple more marijuana issues before finally bowing out in China. The way that people speak about Beasley is as if he was one of the better players in the league, and as the story goes, he could beat anyone in one-on-one, which includes LeBron James. But that wouldn't exactly be the case. His issues off the court and inconsistency on it outweighed the times where he looked like the Michael Beasley that averaged 26 and 12 at K-State. The following season would produce Hasheem Thabeet, which honestly did as much harm to the number 2 pick as he could have, as it became pretty clear that after he was drafted by the Grizzlies, he would not be the dominant force that teams had hoped him to be. After 3 years holding it down at UConn, Thabeet would be selected for his innate shot blocking ability and his 7'3" size. But not even a season into his career, it was clear that there was a lot of work to be done. He had come into the league with a very raw and not at all polished offensive game, and dominated the defensive game in college really just due to his pure size. And so, when he got to the NBA, other big men ate him up. It was clear that Thabeet was not quite as good as the Grizzlies had hoped when they struggled to give him more playing time than they did. And he averages 13 minutes per game behind a young Marc Gasol, averaging 3 points, 3 rebounds, and 1.4 blocks per game. But after getting sent down to the D-League for a short stint, Memphis fans began worrying, and they were right in doing so, because it would be all downhill from there. In his second season, he went from shooting 58% from the floor to 42%, and averaged more fouls than he did points. Additionally, with the progression of Marc Gasol when Thabeet was on the floor, his team struggled. Offensively, the Grizzlies saw a 5.5 drop in offensive rating when Thabeet was on the floor, but more surprisingly, whoever the Grizzlies were playing had a positive 12.5 offensive rating when he was on the floor compared to off of it. I mean, for a guy who was supposed to come in and be a defensive force and rim protector at the highest level, that's just fucking awful. So it should come as no surprise that the Grizzlies wanted to get rid of him, and they were able to ship him off to Houston with a first-round pick for an aging Shane Battier and undrafted rookie Ish Smith. He would play in 2 games for 2 minutes each, and spent some more time in the D-League and had already labeled himself as much worse than a bust. He would get traded to Portland in the next year and play out the rest of his rookie contract before signing with the Thunder, averaging 2 points and 2 rebounds across 2 seasons with the team before getting traded to Philly, who waived him not long after. He would end up spending more time in the D-League before going overseas and playing in Japan and Taiwan. After sweeping National Player of the Year award honors at Ohio State, Evan Turner came into the league as a do-everything wing with a versatile frame and a guy who could develop into a franchise cornerstone. Drafted by Philly, Turner started off slower than expected, averaging 7, 4, and 2 in his rookie season on subpar shooting. The Sixers would end up meeting the powerhouse Heat in the first round, and although they would be routed in 5, Turner was praised for helping to hold D-Wade to his lowest points average in a playoff series since his rookie season. Each year, Turner would improve, averaging 13 a game in his third season, but it was becoming increasingly clear that Turner was not the player that Philadelphia had hoped he would be. He wasn't that athletic, he struggled to shoot the ball from 3, and to put it simply, he wasn't good enough with the ball in his hands to command that big of a role. In 2013, he would start off the year having his best season yet, averaging near 17 points per game, but would end up getting traded to Indiana mid-season, which killed all the momentum he had. He went from a starter averaging 35 minutes to a bench guy barely scratching 20. He would shoot efficiently from the field in that short stint before signing a deal with Boston with a modest contract. Under coach Brad Stevens, Turner would find more of a role for himself. Once again, his shooting was abysmal, but his basketball IQ and passing ability was good enough that after 2 years, he would sign a 4-year, $70 million deal with Portland. But soon enough, that contract would prove to be a huge overpay. In his first year with the team, he would average 9 a game, but that's the best that it would ever get. Around CJ and Dame, Turner just didn't fit in. Portland completely made him an off-ball shooter, which in no way played to his strengths, and to be honest, he just wasn't good enough. He would end up getting traded to Atlanta in the final year of his contract before retiring after a disappointing season, which involved him getting traded to Minnesota, and then never even seeing the courts. Evan Turner is at least able to make somewhat of a name for himself in the league after that horrible back injury in college, but that might still even be at reach. As far as high draft picks go, he certainly was a bust. But with how unlucky these second overall picks go, maybe his career wasn't even that bad. And then there's Derrick Williams, who the Timberwolves took a chance on in 2011. They had sky-high expectations for this athletic and versatile forward out of Arizona, who was getting compared to guys like David West. In his rookie season, he had shooting splits of 41, 27, and 70, which was far from the 60% shooting and 51% from 3 that they had seen in college. But he could still change a game on any given night, and he showed that in his second year, scoring as much as 28 points multiple times. But there was still something off. Averaging 12 and 5 wasn't that bad by that time in his career, but he didn't play with a chip on his shoulder, and wasn't quite as motivated as many young stars are. Plus, Kevin Love had been gone for nearly the entire season, so there were opportunities for Williams that wouldn't have been there otherwise. He began to fall into the dreaded tweener category. Too big to be a 3, but too small to be a 4, and his career started to fall very quickly. And once Love came back, Williams would see his minutes fall off a cliff, going from 24 a game to 14, which ultimately ended in a trade to the Kings, where he would be utilized once again, but the same problems appeared. Rough shooting and a lack of effort, but the Kings probably should have known what they were getting themselves into. And when he produced the same way next season, they must have been done with him, because he would go elsewhere and sign with the Knicks in free agency. He would spend the next 2 years on 3 teams before going overseas, which would earn him one final 10-day contract with the Lakers before playing overseas for the remainder of his career, and never coming anywhere near what people had hoped he could be. And the same can go for our next guy, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, who at the time made headlines for getting drafted right after his college teammate Anthony Davis, becoming the first college teammate duo to go 1-2 in the draft. Before he got to the league, there were some visible problems, like that fucking jump shot, dude. But people seemed to believe that he could get past his offensive shortcomings. They saw him as a strong, athletic small forward with great on-ball defense and rebounding. When he got to the league, he was everything that people believed he would be, both the good and the bad. He definitely was the athletic and fearless forward that the Hornets had hoped he would become, but his offense lacked progression to a crazy extent. He would average 9 and 6, but would still have moments which proved he had potential, becoming just the second player in history to have 2 25 and 12 games before his 20th birthday. But then came the injury problems. In the 13-14 season, he would miss 19 games due to injury, but after reportedly redeveloping his jump shot in the 2014 offseason, there were some high hopes. In the next season, he would average 11 points and 7.6 rebounds with almost a block and half a steal a game. But more importantly, the Hornets were much better with him than without him. With Michael Kidd-Gilchrist out there, they would be 27 and 28, but without him, they were a meager 6 and 21. He gave the Hornets a little bit of everything, which was great for the team, but on the outside, it looked like Kid Gilchrist was becoming just another bust, and another average role player drafted at the number 2 spot. Because of that, he would get to sign a 4-year, $53 million deal. But after separating his shoulder in the preseason of the next year, he would miss 4 months, and after just 7 games, he would be ruled out again with another shoulder injury. In the next 2 seasons, he would show little to no offensive progression, averaging under 10 points per game in both, and by then, the Hornets have given up hope for their former prospect. Sure, he could get to the rim, and sure, he was one of the best defenders in the NBA at the time, but he couldn't shoot the ball worth a damn or get himself a shot of any form, and that was something that the Hornets couldn't handle any longer. And so, they benched him with Nicholas Batum and Marvin Williams taking the starting forward spots. It was hard to justify keeping him on the floor. He was abysmal on offense, and wasn't the elite defender that he was hyped up to be when he got to the league. He would miss a handful of games in the 18-19 offseason while averaging career lows in points, rebounds, minutes, everything. And you already know that he was going to pick up a $13 million option because he wasn't going to get that kind of money elsewhere for the next season, which would end in a buyout due to some injury problems yet again, and would sign with the Mavericks post-COVID before leaving the sport altogether, all by the age of just 26 years old. Victor Oladipo has become infamous for vanishing after his run with the Pacers, and he is one of those guys who seemed like an outlier for a time at the number 2 pick after getting drafted by the Orlando Magic. Compared to guys like Tony Allen, Victor Oladipo was expected to be hyper-athletic, a two-way guard who would pick your pocket and get a bucket afterwards. Without Dwight Howard, the Magic needed a new star, and after averaging 14-4-4 in his rookie season, it looked like he had the potential to be that guy. In his second year, he was the second leading scorer on the team with around 18 a game, would have some setbacks in the next season after getting concussed twice in a 5-month span. And even though he would produce for the team, whether it was starting or coming off the bench, the Magic didn't seem to think he was as valuable as Serge Ibaka, who they traded for that offseason. Now, Serge Ibaka was definitely a tempting target for the Magic, who decided they wanted to ride with Vucevic and Elfrid Payton. But after spending a year in OKC and moving on to Indiana, the performances that he put on probably proved to Orlando that they made a mistake in giving up the young guard. Because in his first year with the team, Oladipo filled the void that PG left with 23 a game and a league-leading 2.4 steals. He won the Most Improved Player award, he got invited to the All-Star game, and he got selected for an All-NBA team, which brought on high hopes for Pacers fans, who finished with a better record than they had in the previous season with Paul George. But that would be the best it would ever get, because first he would rupture a quad tendon, keeping him out for the entirety of the second half of that next season. He would then struggle to recover with the 371-day gap in between his initial injury and his return to the NBA in January of 2020. In the next season, he would play minimal games for Indiana before getting dealt to Houston, who looked at Oladipo as if he were the same all-star in Indiana, offering him a 2-year, $45 million extension, which he turned down. After turning down the offer, he would be sent to Miami, who signed him to a vet's minimum the next season due to another season-ending surgery. But just when it looked like Oladipo was becoming an asset again, he tore a patella tendon in his left knee in the 2023 playoffs, and although he was passed around as much as Michael Beasley's blunt in the next season, he hasn't seen the court since, thus ending his NBA career entirely. Even though he hasn't officially retired, his injuries have done too much to harm him at this point. And although it's sad to say, we probably won't be seeing much of Oladipo from here on out. Now, Jabari Parker came to the league in 2014 as one of the most highly touted prospects the league had seen in a while, drawing comparisons to a Carmelo Anthony type of player and signing with Rich Paul, the Jordan brand, and skipped out of the combine en route to Milwaukee as the second overall pick, and would show off his size, strength, and potential in his rookie season before tragically coming down with an ACL tear in December, which would roll into the next season. But in the 76 games that he did play, he averaged 14-5 for a pretty appalling Bucks team. But the next season, both him and Giannis would have breakout years, with Jabari averaging 20-6 while developing his three-point shot. But in February of that year, he would come down with what would be another torn ACL in the same knee. The recovery was expected to put him out for both the rest of that season and most of the next, forcing him to play in just 31 games, and oh yeah, he was benched as well. His explosiveness and exceptional lateral quickness just weren't the same after the two ACL tears, and the Bucks had simply moved on. They would pull a qualifying offer in order for him to sign a 2-year, $40 million deal with the Bulls in the next season, but not long after Jim Boylan took over the coaching job from Fred Hoiberg, Parker was relegated to the bench. He still had his moments where he looked like the Duke prospect that hadn't destroyed his knee, but more often than not, he struggled to stay mobile on the floor, and so when the Bulls sent him to DC for Otto Porter, it didn't come as much of a shock. Washington would then decline the team option, which would have yielded him $20 million, so he would sign another 2-year deal with the Hawks, who would trade him to the Kings after he had some shoulder issues. But they didn't want him either, waiving him in March of the next season. He has since signed a deal with FC Barcelona at the young age of 28, but his early exit from the league was clearly tough on him. And then came 3 straight shots for the Lakers, starting with D'Angelo Russell, who didn't exactly make a case for himself with the Lakers, as he turned the ball over too much and was a defensive liability and a snitch at times. He was a good scorer, but not the most efficient, and so they sent him to Brooklyn in 2017 alongside Mozgov for Brook Lopez and what would be Kyle Kuzma. The next season, he would have some knee issues, but the year after, everything would come together for Brooklyn. And they put together one of the most exciting teams with guys like Joe Harris, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Jared Allen alongside D'Lo, who would earn his first All-Star appearance that season while averaging 22 and 7. It was exactly what Russell needed. He had a perfect set of role players around him, and his confidence showed that. He was a bucket getter, and because of that, his team could overlook his defensive shortcomings. He was able to lead his team to a playoff appearance. But that would be the best it would get for D'Lo in Brooklyn, as the team went after Kyrie and KD in the next offseason, but who could blame them? I'm sure everyone would rather have a 27-year-old Kyrie than fucking D'Angelo Russell at points. And so, Russell would become a part of a package to get KD from the Warriors, and that is where we would see the best version of D'Angelo Russell we've seen, averaging 23 and 6 before getting traded mid-season to Minnesota, where he would team up with Karl Anthony Towns. The two on paper at least were set to be a dangerous duo in the league, but with the arrival of Anthony Edwards, there was a new guy in town. And every year that Edwards got better, Russell's role shrunk. But he still showed that he could get a bucket, averaging 18 and 6 throughout his time with the T-Wolves. But this dude was highly inconsistent and couldn't string together another season like the one in Brooklyn. And so, Minnesota shipped him back to the Lakers, and while it looked like it was working out there at first, he quickly turned into a scapegoat that would be blamed for his inconsistencies and lack of confidence throughout every up and down through the season. He would finally be benched, but for fucking Cam Reddish, and the Lakers would finally find a buyer for the point guard, his former team, the Brooklyn Nets. In his short time, he's put up career lows in both field goal, three-point percentage, and points. It's sad, really. For someone who looked like a legit all-star for one short season, Russell has been severely disappointing, and has really put up a career more in the category of a one-hit wonder than anything. The next guy to be taken by the Lakers would be Brandon Ingram, a lanky forward with a huge wingspan, really the only person who's ever warranted the Kevin Durant comparison. He would start off by having a bit of a slow rookie season, shooting below 30% from 3, but after putting up 47 and 39 shooting splits with 16 points per game in his second season, there wasn't too much to worry about. In the next year, he would progress even further, averaging 18 on nearly 50% shooting. But his season would be cut short with deep vein thrombosis, the same injury that has affected guys like Dame and Wemby. In the next offseason, he would be traded to New Orleans in the haul that netted the Lakers Anthony Davis, and there he would really break out into the player he would be. He would win the Most Improved Player award in his first season, dropping 24, 6, and 4 in an All-Star appearance to show. He's been a good facilitator in his position and an even better scorer. He was rewarded with a 5-year, $158 million deal in 2020. And every season since has looked about the same. You could pretty much chuck him down to average something around 22 to 23 a game, but he hasn't been able to put together a full, healthy, and complete season in a while. This year he was sent to Toronto for some picks and a couple of role players, and signed another huge deal after arriving, but hasn't suited up since due to an ankle injury. But if he can come back and stay healthy, I think Ingram could be exciting for the Raptors in years to come. And then, there's Lonzo. You may know about Lonzo and the Ball family for a variety of reasons, but at first, they were known for their days at Chino Hills, winning game after game by ungodly amounts. Lonzo was the first Ball brother to get a shot at making the league, and after an All-American season at UCLA, expectations were sky high, although they were likely inflated by his father LeVar Ball's crazy takes, like that a prime Steph couldn't have been as useful in college as Lonzo was. There was no doubt that Lonzo was the real deal. He was a one-of-a-kind playmaker with exceptional size at the point guard position, and after going to the Lakers, he proved that he could produce at the next level, averaging 10 and 7 in his rookie season. But there was still work to be done, especially with the scoring, as his shooting splits were pretty brutal at 36, 30, and 45. There were some injury issues too, as he hurt both his shoulder and his knee, restricting him to just 52 games that season. He would end up getting knee surgery that offseason, but the signing of LeBron was able to shift the focus off that. He would come back bigger, which would help him on the defensive side of the ball, and while he would get a bit better offensively, he would once again miss nearly half the season. But in 2019, LA sent him in that deal with Brandon Ingram for Anthony Davis, and he was given a fresh start in an enlarged role. In New Orleans, he could be seen day after day working on his shooting form in an attempt to fix his extremely broken jumper, and it seemed to be working. He was putting up more shots, especially more threes, and he was setting career highs in efficiency, bumping his three-point percentage all the way up to 37.5%. He was put in a 3-and-D role by Stan Van Gundy during his Pelicans tenure, and it really was the best thing for him. During his second year in New Orleans, he averaged 14.6 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists on 41, 38, and 78 shooting splits, all of which were career bests. With Brandon Ingram and Zion Williams alongside him, Ball was thriving. Well, if you take out the fact that he struggled to stay healthy throughout an entire season. After 2 years with New Orleans, Ball was a restricted free agent. He felt comfortable with returning to New Orleans, but would end up getting dealt to Chicago in a sign-and-trade situation and signing a 4-year, $85 million extension with the Bulls. In Chicago, he would continue refining his game with career-best shooting, but after tearing his meniscus, he would be out for 6 to 8 weeks, which would turn into the rest of the season as his recovery was nowhere near smooth. His knee was really fucked up, man, that even some doctors were confused with it. He would end up getting a second surgery, which kept him out for the opening stages of the next season. But 3 weeks after the boundaries of his recovery date, he would still be unable to run, jump, or cut, and hadn't played basketball at a good speed in almost a year. Basically, he had messed up his knee so bad with multiple meniscus tears in his Lakers days that there wasn't much meniscus left, and bone on bone was rubbing together, creating a lack of cartilage. He would end up getting a meniscus donor and a cartilage transplant, and the recovery process started once again. But this time, he progressed to the point where he was able to play in a game in the 2024 preseason, which was his first NBA game in 1,006 days. As you could probably guess, Lonzo has come across some serious injury issues, but after almost 3 years of recovery, it's good to just see him out there. He has clearly struggled to get up to speed, but that's expected, and let's just hope that he can get back to being the player that we saw in New Orleans or that first year in Chicago in the next couple of years here. When the Sacramento Kings took Marvin Bagley in 2018, let's just say that there were mixed reactions among fans. On the one hand, you had the fans that were excited with the prospect, but on the other hand, you had the fans that were extremely upset that Sacramento had passed on Luka Doncic, and fans that didn't see Bagley turning into a superstar. And let's just say that that second group is right. He was too weak to hold it down with other fives, and didn't have the lateral quickness to guard the forward positions. He wasn't exactly amazing in any major aspect of the game. But his 15-7 season to start off his career gave fans the belief that he could develop significantly over the years to come. He would miss all but 13 games in the next season and lose out on some much-needed development time. However, after earning a starting spot in the next year, it was time to see what he could do. But he didn't do much. He once again missed quite a bit of time, playing in just over half of the season and averaging less points, rebounds, and blocks than he did in his rookie year. He would start the next season on the bench after failing to reach an agreement during contract negotiations, but would get his spot in the lineup back for a little while before getting sent to Detroit for a minimal return, which proved just how far his stock had fallen. There he was able to bounce back just slightly, averaging 15-7 in his stint that season, boosting his offensive rating and efficiency to a whole new level, and earning him a 3-year deal with the Pistons. Unfortunately for both parties, the cycle continued, and Bagley played in just 42 games in the next season. It doesn't matter how good you are if you can't stay on the floor for most of the year. You aren't going to get your flowers, and that was the case with Bagley almost every year. The Pistons would end up sending him to DC, who would then send him to Memphis, where he now plays as an end-of-the-bench role player who may or may not see a couple minutes on a game-to-game basis. Marvin Bagley's journey has been rough. He hasn't played more than 50 games in a single season since his rookie year, and if you can't sustain that level of play, I don't know what to tell you, man. Now next up we got Ja Morant. After absolutely dominating the college game at Murray State for 2 years, Ja Morant came into the league with whispers that he would be a future superstar. His shocking athleticism and jaw-dropping dunks made him a player that got people's asses in the seats, and after getting drafted second right after Zion Williamson, the Grizzlies had their guy from the get-go. Nearly the unanimous Rookie of the Year in 2020, Morant would average 18-7 and started cashing in on his promises of high-flying dunks and humiliating posters. His rise was meteoric, and in just his third season, he was able to lead Memphis to a 2 seed in the West and the Western Conference semis while winning Most Improved Player, getting an All-Star nod and All-NBA nod. He dropped 27 a game with 7 assists, and the only reason that fans felt split on him winning Most Improved was because they felt he was already at star status. In those playoffs, he joined just Kobe and LeBron in a club of players to have 2 45-plus point games before the age of 23. And had he not have come down with a knee injury against Golden State, maybe there could have been even more. That offseason, he got a well-deserved 5-year, $193 million deal and the ability to go up to 230. And he earned that money after leading them to another 2 seed while averaging 26 and 8. Continuing to add high-flying blocks and posters to his highlight reel, everything seemed to be alright with Morant. But slowly, things started coming out of the woodworks, and yes, by things, I mean guns. In March of 2023, Morant was seen flashing a gun on Instagram Live. He would deactivate his socials, release an official statement, and would end up missing 9 games. But everything seemed alright, because he surely wasn't going to make the same mistake twice, right? Well, he did. 2 months after the first incident, he would be caught flashing a gun on one of his friends' live streams. And it was just disappointing. Adam Silver himself said he was shocked after the incident, and it all led to a 25-game suspension for Morant. He would return to action in December after serving the suspension, but after a season-ending surgery that January, he had finished the season with just 9 games played. And now we come to this season. And don't think there hasn't been any controversy. On April 1st, both Morant and Buddy Hield were reprimanded for making gun gestures at each other, but even after getting scolded, Morant did it again 2 days later. He was fined $75,000, but his response, "Yeah, I don't care no more." Ja Morant is a one-of-a-kind athlete and can do great things in the league if he holds himself together, which he's kind of struggled to do. Now, James Wiseman is the last guy we'll go really in-depth on because it seems like a lot of people have forgot that he was taken 2nd overall by the Warriors in 2020. But the odds started stacking up against him even before he got to the league, because he was only allowed to play in 3 games with Memphis due to NCAA recruiting violations, meaning that he would enter the league with just 69 minutes of college basketball under his belt. But there have been plenty of guys to forego college and be incredibly successful in the league, so it wasn't seen as too big of a problem. He would average 11 and 6 in his rookie year, but he wasn't nearly as useful as the Warriors hoped he would be. Contrary to prior beliefs, teams played better when he was on the floor due to missed rotations and unnecessary fouls from the big man. With Wiseman on the floor, the Warriors had a minus 11.2 offensive differential compared to when he was off. But the opposition had a positive 3.4 offensive rating when Wiseman was on the floor. The only positive he brought was consistent shot blocking, but when that doesn't actually lower the shooting percentage at the rim, it isn't really helpful. Unfortunately, he would tear his meniscus and get sidelined for nearly a full year before coming back to play in the G League. But he had missed the entirety of what would have been his 2nd season, while not contributing even 1 minute to the Warriors' title that season. He just couldn't grasp Steve Kerr's system, both offensively and defensively, and the Warriors' patience grew thin, trading him away to the Pistons halfway through the next year. There he would average 13 and 8 in 24 games before spending the next season behind fellow Memphis Tiger Jalen Duren, but advanced metrics still showed him as a net negative when he was on the floor. He would end up signing a 2-year deal in free agency with the Pacers, but after tearing his Achilles in the season opener, he would be traded to the Raptors for a top 55 protected 2nd-round pick and get waived shortly after. Wiseman's career, frankly, has just been disastrous. Whether or not he could even find another home in the league is uncertain. But it just comes to show you that drafting someone with little to no past production can be risky because pure potential doesn't tell the whole story. Now, I'm not going to grill anyone from 2021 onwards as they haven't really had a big enough sample size, and the 20-year window from 2000 to 2020 was absolutely ridiculous. Really, the only great careers to come from this period were LaMarcus Aldridge, KD, and probably Ja Morant, while even Ja seems to want to ruin it. In terms of stars' careers ruined by injury, we had Victor Oladipo, kinda Brandon Ingram, and Jabari Parker, while he seemed to be on his way up. I mean, even the role players got crippled by injuries from Lonzo to Kid Gilchrist to Emeka Okafor. I mean, this period from this selection has produced a ridiculous amount of draft busts, like Stromile Swift, Darko Milicic, Hasheem Thabeet, and James Wiseman, not counting like half of them whose careers were certainly close to that category. So really, is the 2nd overall cursed? Well, from what we've learned here today, it's for damn sure not blessed. Thank you for watching if you made it this far. Subscribe if you're new. We're trying to hit 100K, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.